Hello and welcome to the Car Care Nut channel. What's up, guys? How you all doing? Well, let's get started. Looks like you guys are all ready. So, Ivan Lopez, thank you for your super chat. Hi, AMD. I will be moving to the Rust Belt next year. I wanted to ask about rust prevention. I think I can count the times I've seen snow on the one road. Thanks for all your help. Well, before I answer that, do you guys hear me well? Just making sure. Somebody would put something on the chat. Okay, I'll just answer that question. So, rust prevention depends on what car you have. Some of the newer ones you don't really need very much rust prevention, but I would spray the bottom of the car if you're worried about it. Consider washing the car. Never wash the car when it's freezing outside and it's like below zero and everything, but you want to establish a good routine of washing the car, especially underneath it. Some of these car washes will have like a jet that blasts the car underneath, cleans all the salt off. That's really it. And the rust proofing, you'd want to repeat it if it wears off, and that's about it really. Eventually cars will rust when the thing gets 10, 15, 20 years old, but all mechanics in the Rust Belt area are used like me. They're used to working on rusty cars, so it's not a very big issue. Mo Anthony says, amid COVID, have there been any part shortages with Toyota? There were some issues back in the late summer. Honestly, I haven't seen any issues. All the parts we've ordered, they came in. All the parts that were in not the local warehouse, were in another warehouse. They came in normally, so I did not see any part shortage in the midst of the pandemic. Right now, it's business as usual. Everything is available. So, Bill Verone, and guys, I apologize if I don't read your names right. What is the status of Venza production? I don't see a lot of inventory. It's actually very available. The dealership where I work, there's a lot on the lot and they're readily available. Maybe if you order one in a special color or something that's in high demand, perhaps there's going to be a little bit of wait. But as far as production, I see them available in most dealerships. I don't think you will have a problem finding the exact one you want. Anthony says, I own a 2021 RAV4 Prime. If I ever need to jump it, can I use my wife's Honda Accord? If I can, do I need to connect directly to the battery, connect it under the hood? So you can jump your hybrid from any other car. That's not an issue. You do want, however, to connect under the hood. You can connect directly to the battery. It's not an issue, but it's just easier under the hood and the connections. That works perfectly fine, or go into the battery as well. Naveen says, could you comment on the panel roof weather stripping coming off on some 1820 Camry owners? Yes, we've seen some of these issues where the weather stripping will come off and then it actually gets jammed in the like the tracks of the sunroof. Toyota has developed some replacement parts, mainly that little cover garnish that also comes off and gets jammed in the mechanism. But as far as the weather stripping, that's something that's developing right now that we're seeing come up. It's not as common as you think, but it's starting to happen. And unfortunately, some of these weather stripping, there's not a service part developed for it yet. I'm pretty sure they will once they start seeing the high warranty claims with whole sunroof replacement. But for now, I don't know if any other service part other than that little strip, like the cover on the side of the panel roofs. And then JD says, how often should a little used Highlander be driven? Folks, if you drive your car once a week, twice a week, a little short drive, that should be enough to keep any car healthy. But you just don't want to let the car sit for like 4 or 5 months, because especially the folks that have like a winter home where they go to another state during the winter, that's what you don't want to do, where you have the car just sit down for a very long time. Let's see. So Michael says, hi, I bought a Sienna 2021 and the brakes are squeaking when I first started driving. I will bring it back to the dealer tomorrow, but I want to ask what will be the reason it's a brand new car. So noises from brakes on brand new cars, folks, it happens. I could totally understand that you would feel upset it's a new car, but they happen. And most of the times, it's sometimes from sitting in transport, a little bit of rain on them, some small amount of rust collect on the pads. It's not a big deal. Usually, we just take them apart, clean it up, put some new grease, and that usually takes care of it. I mean, cars are new. Most dealerships will be like, you know what, we're going to try it once. If it's not 100%, we're just going to put new brakes, and we're not messing about with a new car because you bought a new car, you don't want to have problems. We don't want you going back and forth a lot of times and have issues with it. So I'm not concerned. That's typical. It happens. It's not every car, and it's not a problem per se. It's just something that needs a little bit of tweaking. So Eric says, when you say that a traction battery is best at 50% charge, does that include the amount that is left in the battery after the electric only range is exhausted? So that refers to the electric range. Some people have said, when I say full charge, it never actually gets to 100%. That is true. One thing you need to be aware of, the range that you see in the screen is the maximum the computer will allow you to get to. So 100% on the screen is not actual 100% in the battery, but still, it's still a high state of charge. 50% of the EV range is where the battery will be most stable. So what you want to do, that's why you utilize a charge schedule. You want to get the car to reach that maximum allowed charge very short time between when it reaches it and when you actually start driving it. You don't want it to sit for 12 hours at full charge every single day, day in and out, and years. That's going to have a negative effect. But if you, as soon as it reaches full charge, you start driving, that's over years, over time, that's actually going to extend the life of the battery. So let's see. So Jack says, are any replacement parts from the dealer made in China? It really depends. I don't really notice where the part is made. Every single Toyota part will have where it's made. Most of them, honestly, are made in the US or in Japan. I don't really recall if there's any parts made in China. So Naveen says, could you comment on the JBL Audio rear deck rattle in 2018 and newer Camrys? I've met owners with JBL Audio who are complaining about it. Folks, rattles from audio systems happen. It's not something specific to one car. It actually happens in any model, especially with the JBL. It's kind of a louder, booming sound, if you would, and it's going to happen. Resolving these issues is very simple. Usually, we just literally use foam. Just insulate a bunch of panels, and everything will quiet down, and life is good. But you do want to bring it to the dealership's attention because sometimes they're time-consuming to find where the source of the rattle is. But once we find it, it's very simple to fix it. It's not really a problem per se. It's just two plastic panels rattling usually. So I'll bring it to the dealership's attention. Or if you're out of warranty, try to go in the back, let the radio run, and just put your hand on the deck. Find the exact area that's rattling, and then maybe pull it up, put some foam underneath it, put it down, just to isolate that rattle. So Right Lane Hog says, 15 years on my Canadian car with no rust, thanks to an annual application known rust proofing. That's very good, guys. There's a lot of products for rust proofing. If you have something that works for you, I would stick with it. And I encourage you guys always to put comments and let me know what products worked for you so I can look into them. And I'm looking into making a video on rust proofing in the near future. So question here, I'm sorry, I can't really read the lettering of your name, but where are the battery fan filters for the 2019 Highlander hybrid? So they're going to be underneath the back seat there, and I'm working on getting a video for that soon, hopefully. So JDMXB says, thanks for all the videos. Sorry if this has been covered, but have you experienced the fuel tank issues with the latest Gen RAV4 hybrid? Yes, it's a known issue, and I know it took some time to get it fixed, but there is a fix for it. You're either going to get a calibration or a fuel tank replacement and a fuel sender, or just a fuel sender. Depends when your car was made, and that's all up to the dealership. You got to take it in. There's actually, I believe recently has been a extension of warranty for that. So you want to call your dealership, The problem has a fix, and the fix has been successful. So bring it to your dealer's attention, and they'll take care of that. So Mito, Mr. Twice as Nice, says, what is the best method to keep the oil burning 2AZ engine going for a long while? So that engine did have a production issue, an actual production issue that increased the chances of oil consumption. I've probably done easily 500-600 of these engines. It's just gonna get new pistons and new rings. That resolves the issue. And we've had actually customers who drove 100,000 miles after the fix, and it still doesn't burn a drop. Same maintenance schedule, same everything, same owner. So this one had a problem. Some of the other ones, I'm gonna have a video coming up here soon on oil consumption, why it happens, and what's the deal. That'll give you a lot more info. Van Du says, for the 2013 Scion FRS, why is there a high proportionate number of complete engine failures after doing the valve spring replacement recall? Folks, I have done a lot of these FRS engines, and I'm honest enough to say, I've had one issue with one, and after a very deep investigation, the conclusion was, we don't know what happened. Potentially, this engine was already had issues, and just opening it up and exposing it to the outside, that was enough to just send it over the edge. All the ones that I've done other than this one, I've never heard about them. They came in again for service. Life is good. One of them is actually my friend's car, and they're still driving in it. It has 50,000 miles more than after we did it. This engine is a little bit sensitive to cleanliness. I mean, I spend a considerable amount of cleaning when I do one of these engines than any other Toyota engine. It's just the way it's designed. Some people blame the Toyota technicians because they are not used to working with a boxer. However, I do have some friends that work with Subaru, and they report the same thing. Just because they don't have as the same numbers as FRSs and the BRZ, they don't have as much to report, but they do have issues with this engine after the recall. So Barto says, I have an 18 Camry. There's a software update for it. How do I convince service writer to update my car? They won't update if my car doesn't exhibit the issues from the service bulletin. Well, that's going to be hard, because if you're paying for it out of your own pocket, they'll do whatever you want. Simple as that. If warranty is paying for it, they cannot just update the car and charge Toyota for it, because then Toyota will come back and say, well, what was the concern for paperwork filling purposes? And if there was no concern, Toyota could say, well, we're not paying for this. You're just gonna have to eat this claim. So that's the reason why. But if you're paying for it, I don't see a reason why a dealership would deny that, unless some updates are like, you have to replace a part with an updated part, then do the update. You can't just do the update on an old part. Some cases are like that, but usually with Toyotas, that's not very common. C-Lock says, I have a UK spec 2020 Corolla Hybrid. Am I best to leave the 12-hour battery on a trickle charger through UK lockdown, as I'm not using it? You could. That works, but you could also just flat disconnect the battery, and that'll really prolong the time for the battery to really come down low. Because remember, all modern cars, they have a little bit of drag on the battery. It's nothing big, but you leave it for a month, 2, 3, that drag is eventually going to kill the battery. But if you disconnect it, there's zero load on that battery. It's going to hold a lot better. But battery maintainer also works. Hossein Karsh says, hi, I have a 16 4Runner that has 65K. When should I change the transmission fluid? I drive in the city all the time. I recommend you replace the fluid every 60,000, 6 years, regardless of what your driving conditions are on non-hybrid cars. That's the mileage when the fluid is still fresh enough, and a little bit over that miles, and when the fluid starts getting really dirty, and some slight shifting problems will start, but you actually might not notice them until you actually change the fluid, and then all of a sudden everything is nice and smooth. Then you notice the difference. So 60K, 6 years for the sealed or WS transmissions. Let's see here. Doug says, What process and equipment would you recommend for a DIYer to flush the brake fluid? So brake fluids on non-hybrids, they're very simple. You just open, you could just simply, without any tools, open the bleeders, let them bleed down, maybe put a hose so the rubber brake fluid will damage the finish on the wheels. Let them gravity bleed, just contain in a little container, and then fill the master cylinder as needed. Never let the master cylinder go below full, and that should be it. You could use a power bleeder where it puts pressure on the master cylinder to push the fluid down, or you can use a vacuum bleeder, just a little air operated vacuum bleeder to pull the fluid through the calipers. Just make sure that master cylinder never drops below minimum, and you should have no issues. So Matt says, I got a 10 Prius and all lights coming up, and it gives me a message, check hybrid battery. So you want to retrieve codes. There's really no way to know exactly what's going on. You want to pull codes. It's not an OBD2 codes. You're going to need some capable scan tool to pull codes from a hybrid. Without that, your guess is as good as mine. We don't know what's going on. You got to read the codes. So let's see. Potrebital, I think. Thank you for all your videos. Owner from Germany. Well, welcome, sir. Thank you very much for watching. Mohammed says, I own an 18 Camry XSE, and it does come up with a 360-degree camera, but every time when I come to drive the car while it's still cold, cameras gets sketchy and it will not stay in place. These cameras, especially if this is cold weather, they get fog on them, or condensation, if you would, and they start going all over the place. You're going to want to, when it does that, go wipe all the cameras down and see if that does anything. That's the only thing I can think of. It's really hard to see without looking at it. Brian Sullivan, how bad is the road noise on the Fenza? So, folks, this will vary from person to person. I know in the review I said it's loud. This will vary on how much you care about this. This bothers you. For me, I enjoy a quiet car. Let's put it this way. When compared to a Camry or a Avalon of the same generation, it is a little bit louder, but it's not something dire where I just can't stand this car. Some people will feel that way, but most people will just not even notice it. But I told you it is a little bit louder than other models, so if this is something that bothers you, maybe you want to take one on a long drive. Make sure this is not something that's going to be a deal breaker for you. So Alex says, hi from Germany. Hey, man. We had the nice theme that Toyota is going now with the gas pedals installed on the floor. Do you think it's a good idea? Why do Toyota is going another way now? So you guys remember back in 2007 to 2009 when there was some issues with the gas pedals, and we still see people put 3-4 floor mats on the car just thinking they were protecting it, but these floor mats eventually get jammed under the pedal and it could get the pedal stuck and you have the unintended acceleration. So I think their way of going from the pedal that mounts on the floor is to prevent that. There are some downsides to it, of course. Rust, their pedal gets kind of weird to press, but from a safety standpoint, I think it is better. That's just my personal opinion, and I think that's why they went with it. There's no official word why they went with it, but that's my best guess, if you would say that. Bill says, I have an 11 Highlander V6, very well taken care of, has 200K, still does not use oil on average. How many miles do you think I can get? So with cars, it's really hard to predict how long they're going to last. The best thing to say with Toyota is drive until the wheels fall off and don't hold your breath because it might be a while. With good maintenance, the V6 in the Highlander or the 2GR FE, the 3.5, is not known for oil consumption at all. It is known for oil leaks and other issues when they get very old, but not known for oil consumption. The only thing I would kill it is complete lack of maintenance, and we've seen some of them that get really bad when you completely neglect them. So John says, is the procedure to remove the back seat of an ES300H the same as you showed for the Camry? It should be similar, not exactly the same, but similar. If I recall correctly, some of these have like a reclining back seat, that would be a little bit more complicated. But the ones that have just a full seat, it will be very similar. But the ones with the reclining seat, they're a little bit more involved. You got to pull the whole seat as one unit, the back of the seat, not the bottom. So I can't read your name, but another owner with a Oris hybrid from Germany. Thank you for watching my videos, sir. So Brian says, how bad, oh, sorry, I read this already. How bad is the road noise in the Venza? Fly by Wire says, hello, I have a 16 Corolla with 60K with a CVT. Every time I get my oil change done at my Toyota dealership, I request to have the fluid changed. They say it's sealed and I don't need it. Dealerships are doing this now. Honestly, the dealership is a place of business. I don't understand why they would deny you paying for service. I mean, they don't want work. I don't get this, but I would try other dealerships. It's every 60K. I highly recommend you replace it. You'll never have problems. Just make sure you use that original fluid. Let's see here. So we got a super sticker from Matt. Thank you very much, Matt. Let's see. Jack says 2009 RAV4 had a recall on the rear lower control arms. The other solution was to make the replacement non-adjustable. Yes, and a lot of people have complained about that, and we have brought this to Toyota's attention. I didn't really get any answer. The only thing is it becomes a solid piece of suspension. If there is an issue with the alignment, you have to replace the whole arm. That's just their idea. And some other models actually don't have adjustable arms in the back. But I hear you. It's kind of an annoying and disappointing thing, because the newer models, they went with eccentrics in the back, and there's some adjustability. But honestly, we have not, after doing the recall, some of the cars will come in with a little bit out of spec, but it's not causing abnormal tire wear or issues. So I'm going to hold my thoughts on this one, but I'm with you. It's kind of disappointing that now we have a non-adjustable rear suspension arm. So Victor says, 2018 Camry thermostat and water pump expensive since they are electric? Not necessarily. Actually, the water pump is very easy to replace. I mean, it's right there, a few bolts, and it comes out. Doesn't even have a belt. You might have to remove the belt because it's in front of it, but it's very simple to replace. Same thing with the thermostat. It's the maintenance on these engines. They look very intimidating, but they're actually not at all. They some different procedures with certain things, but working on the engine itself, the outside stuff, they're not extremely difficult. Serge says, manual for RAV4 Prime talks about the battery installation for Canadian and Alaska models. What is it and how is it different from US 50 states model? Honestly, I do not have an answer for that one because I live in the US. I don't know how the Canadian market have a different additive, but if I would take a wild guess from Canada and Alaska, whether it's too cold and the battery sits outside, they're likely having some more insulation to make sure there's not freezing stuff on it, and now the temperature is too cold and because remember, batteries also too cold is not as bad as when it's too hot, but too cold is also not good. They need to be at that perfect temperature to operate perfectly. So Kevin says, is there any harm to leave the car in hybrid idle mode to keep it running for 5 to 10 minutes? Will it affect the 12-volt battery? No, as long as the car is in ready mode, so ready, the hybrid system is on, it's not off, you should have no problem, because at that point you're not using the 12-volt battery. But if the car is an accessory, not the ready is off, the ready light is off, you're actually consuming the power from the 12-volt battery. And knowing hybrids, they have very small 12-volt battery, is gonna run out pretty quick. So I would leave the car running, if you would, ready on, even if the engine turns off. That's normal. All right. Mashur says 19 Highlander 70K 8-speed auto slipping and jerks sometimes. I would start by checking the fluid level and actually replacing the fluid to see if that resolves any issues. If not, try to reset the memory and go from there. The 19 Highlander should not have the same the same issues that some of the 17s and the early 18s, but it might be covered by the extended policy. I would contact your dealership, give them your VIN number, and see what they say. So Neil said, I posted a question about the 2012 Camry Hybrid earlier this week. Just wanted to say thank you. You're welcome. Soccer Dad, what's up, man? Good to see you. Thanks, AMD. Do you all new Highlanders and Siennas come with a rear screen entertainment? No, actually. So I think it's a package. The higher package ones will come, and I believe even then it's still an option. Don't quote me on that. I'm not very good on the sales end of things, but I actually recommend you do get that option, because especially on the Sienna, even your resale value will be better in the end, but that's just my opinion. But they don't all come with it. Actually, I discovered something on the 2021 Sienna. The lower grades don't come with a smart key, which is interesting. So you can start the car with a button, but you can't open the door and it'll just unlock. You have to use the physical remote. Don't know why they did it that way, but that's something we discovered recently. So Andrew, any reliability issues with the 2ZRFE 15 Corolla? No, the only things on these is isolated water pump here and there, nothing major. We have not seen any issues on rattle and cold start. That seems to have been resolved. Another common issue that was resolved with these is a drive belt making noise. That should have a hydraulic tensioner. If not, then it's the older one. Not a huge deal, but it's a manual drive belt tensioner. So John says 2020 Highlander DCM low bars and not always reachable. Is there a fix? That depends where you are at. Remember that the DCM, which is the data communication modules for folks who are not familiar with it, it's essentially a cell phone. It uses Verizon in the United States. I don't know about other parts of the world. If there is not good Verizon network in your area, it's going to just not have good signal. But if you have a Verizon network or you have another Toyota with a DCM, I would bring it to the dealership's attention, because there might be something also inside the car. Like if you have, one thing we've seen is if you have stuff plugged in the USB, a phone charger, sometimes that will interfere with the signal of the DCM. So if you have nothing there, check Verizon's network in your area. That could be the issue. Let me see here. So Toyota Celica says, hello, I live in Switzerland. My Lexus dealer puts in my Lexus IS300H 2A RFSE 0W20 oil. Do you think that's a good choice? I think that's a good choice. I think that's, if I'm not mistaken, that might be the official oil that it takes. But Switzerland, you don't have your normally cold weather like us in Chicago, so that should be perfect oil. I believe it is full synthetic, though. You didn't give me the year, but it might be full synthetic, so that's, you want to stick with that. 2010 Highlander hybrid. Do I have to normalize, initialize engine idle after 12-volt battery change disconnect? On hybrids, you don't. So just, I still recommend you clean throttle body here and there, but the hybrid system will idle much higher. The engines in hybrids will idle much higher than normal. That's so you don't have to do anything to the idle after a battery disconnect. So Dan says, I just bought an 18 RAV4 LE 38K. Can you let me know things to look out for? The car was made in Japan and is a CPO. So I do have a video on the RAV4. I encourage you to find it, but the biggest thing with the RAV4s is some oil leaks from the engine that are somewhat common. You're going to have a hard time getting your dealership to go ahead and do it, because it needs to be a big enough leak for them to warranty it. But in your CPO, if you're in the US, you should have 7 years, 100,000. So that's a long time. And if it's starting to leak right now, by the time that warranty is up, it's definitely going to be a big leak, and they'll get it taken care of. Otherwise, stay with your 5K 6-month oil changes, and you should have no issues with this car. This is a really good car. Gus says, I like to know on a Corolla CVT trans fluid change, does it take 2.5 quarts to fill the trans? So I'm trying to remember if it's, I want to say it takes 3.5 or 4, not necessarily 2.5, but don't quote me on that. Always measure your amount or that you drain, but usually they sell it in this, I think, 4-liter container. You rarely will need more than one unless you're doing some other work to it. But that container is gonna fill the car and leave you a lot extra. So RT Brady, thank you for your super chat. Got a 24 runner and it's killing rotators like crazy. Seems like every 15-20K miles, and lots of highway driving and good bit of stop and go. I'm assuming you refer to the rotors, brake rotors. So Highlanders have, Forerunners have always been like that. They just eat rotors. That's the way they are. The biggest thing about them is your driving habits. If you do a lot of hard braking and the temperature is hot when you're where you're at, unfortunately, there's no way around them. Perhaps experiment with some higher quality aftermarket. I doubt you'll find a lot, but it has to do with your driving style. I'm sorry to say this, but it's the truth. Take it easy on the brakes a little bit. The vibrations, never resurface or turn these rotors or machine them. Always replace them, and that should give you the best results. So Alex says, what motor oil do offer 0W16 now? The A25 and the M20 in the United States are required to use 0W16. And Mashur says, is there update for the Entune for the Highlander 2019? I have an old version. I believe there is an update for those. You're going to have to call your dealership because they have to look at the current version in your car and see if there is an update. And some of the Entune apps actually, they get an update over the air on some models. So if you ever get a message, it'll pop a message, Entune update available. Always update it. It's going to download first, and it's going to ask you again, do you want to install it? That's when you install it. So Alex Mobile says again about the 0W16. Castrol doesn't offer it. I think Mobile One does, because that's the official oil from Toyota. So I know some people have preferences on brands of oil, but in the meantime, I would go with Mobile One when Castrol does eventually make 0W16. That's an awesome oil company as well. You can go back to them if that's your preference. So Horimat says, hi MD, how could you make sure that the conventional CVT lasts as long as possible in a 2020 Corolla LE? Is it possible to achieve 300K on this? It's possible because it's Toyota, but one thing you want to do is change the fluid every 60K, use original fluid, and just generally take care of your car. No hard driving, super high speed, and like hard acceleration every day and every day. Normal driving, normal taking care of your car. And I don't see a problem with it lasting. I can't tell you it'll definitely, with a guarantee, last 300K, but there's a very high potential for it. So Erskine Presley says, I have a 2021 Toyota Tundra. Should I change the oil at 500 miles? If so, will it hurt braking if I use Mobil 1 synthetic oil? So I actually encourage, and I do this personally, if you change your oil the first time, the break-in oil change between 500 and 1,000 miles, it's a very good idea. If you didn't do it when it was new, it's okay. It's not the end of the world, but you can absolutely use Mobil 1 synthetic oil of the right weight for your car, which is probably 0W20. Mobil 1 is the supplier of Toyota oil, so I don't see any problem with that. Chris Gonzalez says, hello, what do you think of the Lexus IS350F Sport? And what will any common issues with these types of vehicles? It depends on the years. The 350 is actually the better one. The 250 in the beginning had some issues, but these are good cars as long as you're buying one that's taken care of. They don't really have a lot of deal breaker issues, if you would. Could be some oil leaks here and there. Could be some suspension work down the road. The brakes are also, they get consumed and they have some noise issues and some stuff like that, but nothing that sticks out. With good maintenance, these are really good cars. Fallen Noob says, "Hi AMD, how come the 2AR and the 10 and 11 Camry have more issues than the 12 to 17?" So they did, and this is not officially confirmed, but there was some production changes in the 10, from the 10, 11 to when they went to the 12 and 17. Unfortunately, the 10 and 11 Camrys, I mean, if you stick with that 10,000 mile oil change, there's a lot of issues with oil consumption, and it gets very bad, and there's no really fix for it at that point. There's no updated parts. It's just lack of maintenance, if you would. The 12 to 17 seems to be a lot better with oil consumption. However, we're starting to see 12 to 14s burn oil because of bad maintenance, going 10, 11, 12,000 miles and going a year, 2, 3 on the oil change. I will have a video talking in detail about oil consumption coming up pretty soon as this week, if God allows. So, Zishan, thank you for your super chat. I collect Toyota memorabilia. Where can I buy Toyota step training manuals from? I have a few from the late 90s, would like a full set. The only full set I have seen is at the Toyota Training Center here in Chicago. You're going to have to choose. Some dealers are flat throwing them out to the garbage because they've been sitting there and unused for long. You might want to walk around, ask around some dealers, some older techs. They would have copies of them. That's the only way really you'll find them, or randomly you'll find them on eBay or someplace like that. But as a place to buy them officially new, that's very hard because they're not available anymore, unfortunately. So Tapio says, "Hi, driving a 15 Lexus NX 300H, super happy with it. Could you point me in the right direction where I could find instructions? What to disassemble to clean the high voltage battery filter?" So the 15 NX 300H should have the battery filter underneath the back seat. Unfortunately, the only place you're going to find instructions is techinfo.toyota.com. That's the place where you can buy a day subscription and actually get the same access to what dealership technicians have. They're the best instructions. There are some companies out there like eManuals. I'm actually they're good friends with me and I love their products, but I doubt they would have something as specific as a high voltage battery filter instructions. Let's see. Neil says, "My friend has a 14 RAV4 that is white and the roof paint has started to peel. Was there a recall or extended warranty for this problem in the US?" Yes. So you want to, especially with the white and super white colors, contact your dealership because there is an ongoing issue and a warranty extension. Contact your dealership, give them your VIN number, and they should tell you what's covered and if your car is covered and how long is that policy, so you would know. Ion says, "Is it okay for a 2020 Prius Prime to sit fully charged for an hour or two?" An hour or two is not going to be an issue, but that hour or two or 3 or 5 over 3, 4, 5 years, that's when things are going to have its negative effect. But doing this every once in a while, every once a week, once every 2, 3 weeks is not an issue. I don't want you to also be a prisoner by your car worrying that it will be a problem. But if you know your normal schedule when you're going to leave, like you go to work, you come back, put the charge schedule. If you one day you woke up and you had something else and you left it charged, it's not the biggest problem in the world, but you try when it's possible not to leave it fully charged and just sitting for hours and hours. That's why I encourage you to use the charge schedule. So Brad says, "What do you think of the new Highlander XLE all-wheel drive?" I actually really like it. I think it's very refined on the inside. A little bit on the, I wish the steering was a little bit more improved. The car is very stable, but the steering wheel still have a kind of a floaty feel to it that could be a lot improved compared to a RAV4. But otherwise, it's a very nice car. We really don't have a lot of issues with these. Usually when a new model comes out, you'll have a few odds and ends here, and Toyota's all over them trying to fix them and get them all perfect. But the Highlander has been pretty quiet. I've read some issues on the internet which I have not run into yet, but very nice car. Especially, actually, you said the XLE. I would look into the sport models. They actually look very sharp. So William says 2021 RAV4 Prime. I noticed the engine does not turn off often during drives. How often would you recommend oil filter change and transmission fluid change? So one thing on the Primes, I still actually recommend the 5,000 miles, 6 months. If you plan to keep this car long, people say, well, the engine doesn't run as long. That's even worse because the oil is just sitting there and not circulating. And remember, gasoline engines will always have a small amount of fuel that seep into the oil, and that's why you got to replace it by time. The transmission fluid, I would change it regular every 60 to 90,000 miles, and it just takes ATFWS. There's nothing different about that. There's different about the trans, how it works, but not in the maintenance. So Arafat says, hi from the Middle East. Hey, man, how you doing? Thank you so much for your videos. I am a subscriber, fan of your channel. Please, how can I have the workshop repair manual for 16 hybrid RAV4 XLE all-wheel drive? So two ways. If you want the official owner's manual, and I don't know if that's going to be, sorry, not owner's manual, service manual. I don't know if that's going to be available in all countries, but go to techinfo.toyota.com. That's where you can purchase access to the official repair manuals. Other companies that I know of that I think are good is eManuals. They provide really good instructions for DIY. You would want to see if they have your year and model owner's repair manual. So, Lonely Poo, thank you for your super chat. I charge it at work. He's referring to, I believe, a Prius Prime, but sometimes I can't get out of work in time to unplug it. Thank you for all your helpful information. Thank you, man. So don't worry about that. You're trying to do your absolute best to not leave it fully charged for a long time, but if life gets a hold of you, if you can't do it, it's not the end of the world. It's not a problem. I wouldn't worry about it. But when you can, try to stick to the charge schedule and not leave the battery fully charged overnight. But when you can't, you can't. The car will be fine. But as much as possible, stick to it. So let's see. Vital says, hi, I have a Camry Hybrid 2012. I work remotely and not really using the car every day. What do I need to do to prolong the battery life? Do I need to change the fluid for this eCVT? So if you drive it once or twice a week, a good drive, kind of a leisurely drive, just drive around town for 15, 20, 30 minutes, whatever the case may be, that should be enough. And the CVT fluid, the eCVT fluid, transmission fluid for your hybrid, I would change it every 60, 90,000 miles. Time-wise, maybe every 6 to 7, 8 years, something like that. So you're right in that window. If you haven't changed it ever, I would go ahead and change it. It's not actually very expensive or difficult if you're doing this yourself. So Van Du says, did spark plugs change for a 13 Prius around 100K, and found spark plug number 2 was caked with much more oil than the other spark plugs? Is that a concern? It could be. The Priuses are known for some carbon buildup because of the EGR. I would actually, the place to look at is the intake manifold, because if you have some of the passages for the EGR that are blocked for all 3 cylinders, just what was it, cylinder number 2, that's the only passage that's going. That's where the exhaust is going back into the intake and going at the spark plug. So I would actually look at your EGR system, make sure it's clean. There's a lot of videos on the internet how to clean them. Personally, I would replace everything and be done with it for another 100K, but try to clean them. I mean, worst case scenario here, you clean it, it doesn't work, okay, but if it works, great, it costs you nothing, just a good afternoon worth of Frenching. So Debronk says, thank you for your super chat. Hi from Canada. Could you give me advice as how to address the yellow check engine light for a 205 Corolla? So honestly, a check engine light could be something as simple as a loose gas cap or something as big as sensor and internal engine problems. But with the '05 Corolla, you would have to retrieve the codes. I actually encourage everybody with a car, especially older cars and people who want to work on the car themselves, you got to have an OBD2 reader. Check the codes. You're welcome to send me an email at thecarcarenut@gmail.com with your codes, and I'll give you an idea of what's going on. Common things for the Corolla that brings people to the dealership. If the weather is very cold, you'll get a code PO171. That would be an intake manifold gasket. Don't go ahead and just replace it. You still got to check for codes. So Yezin says, would you recommend paying $1,500 service bill to repair the 17 Camry oil leak? Honestly, with oil leaks, if you're going to pay out of pocket, the first thing I would recommend you do is clean the leak, drive the car. If it's 3 years before you see the leak again, clean it again, because that's not a very active leak where I'm worried about. But if you clean it and 2 weeks later it's back to the exact same, then I think it is worth it taking care of your car. That's a big enough leak where it's worth fixing. But if it's 3 years, I'm not very worried, and I'd rather you put that $1,500 in doing something for your family around the home, or just flat save it. Eric says, thank you for your supercharge, Eric. Any tips about changing the date on the Prius Prime? For whatever reason, mine was set with the day from day one, day off, and I can't find any references to how to change it. So I'm trying to read. Mine was set the day. So I believe on the Priuses, and I'm trying to remember the Prius Prime, you go in the settings of the screen, like where the speed is and everything, and that's where you set the date. If you have issues with it, look at your owner's manual. If you still have issues with it, do send me an email at thecarcarenut with a picture of where your date is, just so I can recollect my memory and see what style you have. Otherwise, it's going to be there, not in the big screen. That's the kind of, I don't know why they did that. You would think it would be better in the screen, but that's how they made it. So Juan says, why do dealers wait around 10K to change the oil on new cars? So folks, that's the recommendation from Toyota. But there's a lot of things that you got to read into for the severe versus normal maintenance. There's a lot of conditions that change most people to severe maintenance on oil changes. And the severe maintenance does say 5,000 miles, 6 months. So you got to be careful. Dealerships are just going by what Toyota tells them, but Toyota will not pay for severe maintenance under the Toyota Care program. So they're only going to do the 10K oil changes. If you are under severe and you have to do it every 5K, you have to pay for the oil change. And trust me, you cannot make a better investment in your beautiful new car than do the oil change every 5K, regardless if it's normal or severe. You will appreciate that investment 5-10 years down the road if you're keeping that car that long. So Sashit says, after refueling gas for 2020 Camry Hybrid, the MPG shows 34 to 54, randomly going up and down. Is this normal? So every time, some of the models, when you fill it up with gas, it'll pick that up and it'll reset the screen. It'll be a little bit erratic at the beginning, because every time you accelerate, it'll go down. You let coast, it'll go up. Give it a few days of driving, and usually it'll settle. It'll kind of set a baseline and it'll start settling. But that could be something normal. Brian says, what tires that come with the Venza are better? Actually, I haven't gotten a chance to look at all the OEM tires, because we're still getting the Venzas with different tires. But usually the OEM tires, they're not just random tires that are placed on the car and let's go pick whatever's on the shelf. OEM tires, folks, they're actually tested with the car, if you would. So putting those tires on, you will get the same driving characteristics, the same noise levels as what the testing team, if you would, or the people that designed the car did. But you could possibly get better tires. You could possibly get worse tires. So with tires, tires make a huge difference on a car. So I would really shop long and hard and do a lot of research when it comes to tires, because they make a huge impact. Could be a positive one, and a lot of times with Toyotas, a negative one when you go to an not off-brand, but a brand that's not normally found on new Toyotas. So, Matt and Rafael Soto, thank you so much for watching, guys. I appreciate it. Rafael says, is the RAV4 Prime worth it? Believe it or not, it is so worth it that I am actually contemplating buying one. Very nice cars, very packed with technology. And to think about it, this is not a specialty car that has some weird shape or some special equipment or whatever. It's just a RAV4. It's exactly the same as any RAV4 you can go at a car rental and rent, the non-hybrids or the hybrids. But now this car has that much electric range. It's an awesome car. It's a very interesting design, has a lot of power for its intended purpose. I'm actually very intrigued by them, and so much that I'm actually looking into getting one. So Bill, why my throttle only goes 87%? I check this visually and look up to the tester, no wide open throttle. So the computer programming will not allow wide open throttle because there's a point where it's pointless. It doesn't, that's as much air as it's going to go in the engine. We don't have forced induction. We don't have superchargers, turbochargers here. And I'm assuming that's the case you're working with. It's just going to open it as much as it needs. And wide open throttle is not exactly just a flat plate where it goes 100% open. It's every car will have a little bit of variance in that, but that's normal. I don't see anything I would worry about. Shane, late but here. You're still late, man. Good to see you, Shane. Thank you so much for joining us, man. R. Brady, thoughts on 3VZ FE? My thoughts, the first thing I see is the broken backs of older techs that I work with. Head gaskets on that engine were, there was a campaign for that. Great engine is actually the 5VZ, the later one is bulletproof. But the 3VZ, other than the head gasket, nothing. It's one of those engines that just keep going and going. As you know, as you put head gaskets on it, that was one of their Achilles heels. Jose, do you think there will ever be some support to connect the Venza limited cameras as a dash cam US? So, folks, this question I've actually brought up and asked a few guys from Toyota about it. Possibly no, because the camera, and I wish I could share that picture, the camera in the dash doesn't exactly show a colored picture. It shows a weird, like, different color because it's not a picture to be seen by a human eye. It's a picture to be seen by a computer brain that's going to process it. So it doesn't show a picture like the picture you see right now in this camera. It just shows a different color scheme to it. So it's not exactly usable as a dash cam, although I agree with you, it would be a great idea. Imagine if the cars had a dash cam built into it. That would be cool. So Jack Brown says 09 Camry to 215K. What's better, Denso or NGK? You know what's better? The right spark plug for the car. Denso and NGK, they're very good companies. Just make sure you have the exact right plug, because spark plugs, folks, if you're not sure, I would go with OEM, because you're only going to replace them once, twice, maybe 3 times in the life of the car, unless you're really keeping it long. But even at that point, you're putting plugs every 120K. It's not worth it. Just go with the OEM, the ones that are designed for this car. And if you're going to go with Denso and NGK, which both are great brands, and most of the time they are the provider of the original plug, just make sure it's the right one, because there's a lot of issues that could happen from putting the wrong plug. So let's see. That's interesting. Every once in a while, the screen just goes up and down. Let me see where we're at. Sorry, guys. Okay, here we are. 10 Yaris hatchback, 300K, reviewing maintenance log. Doesn't look like they have changed out the PCV valve. Should I change it? You know what? PCV valves are not a maintenance item on Toyota. They don't put it as a maintenance item, but on most models, they're right there. They take you 5 minutes to replace. You know what? you can't cause any harm by replacing it. So yeah, I would say go ahead and replace it. Usually you take a PCV valve, rattle it. If it's rattling and it's actually the one-way valve is working, where you can push air one side but you can't the other, I don't see a problem why you need to replace it as a maintenance item. But it's a few bucks. By the time you got it out to test it, just put a new one, have zero doubt about it. One thing I'll say about PCV valves, never put an aftermarket PCV valve. I've seen a lot of issues with aftermarket PCV valves. So if you're going to replace it, put an original one or leave it alone. That would be my recommendation, honestly. So Jason says, 13 GX460, the AC turns itself off continuously. I turn it on, blows cold, and the button on the screen turns itself off. The air is still blowing, just not cold. So there's a lot of things that would cause that. Honestly, that would be something that would need to be diagnosed. But any issues with the compressor is going to shut off. Any issues with the relay is going to shut off. I would look at, is the system fully charged? So that's the first thing. And the second thing, it doesn't have any trouble codes for the AC system, and then go from there. Again, it could be issues with the compressor or the relay. Joe says, '08 Camry, AC works, but it only blows out the window defroster and feet vent. Why? So when you change the modes, it doesn't work. That's what I'm taking from this. It could be a lot of things, but usually the mode servo, that's what changed. Common to go on some older Toyotas. '08 Camry is not really one of the common ones, but it's very possible. It's just a motor that moves. If it's just a bad motor from age, replace it. Toyotas are not known for broken doors and issues. Some of them are, but '08 Camry is not one of them. I would look at the servo, the motor that actually moves the door to change the direction of the air. Ivan Lopez, any issues with RAV4 with V6 engine? Yes and no, depends how you look at it. So they're notorious for oil leaks, external head gasket leaks, and if not maintained, they're a nightmare to work on, because anything you do with that car, you got to pull the engine out of the car, and it's a small nightmare. I actually recently pulled one out, and it refreshes my memory how difficult that engine is to work on. When you pull it out of the car, it's very difficult to pull out. Sandy says, I took my 19 RAV4 hybrid to a dealer. There was a noise from the struts. Dealer says there were no issues with the struts. Are you aware of any problems? Not yet, but I see that coming, because it's a very similar design strut to the one in the Camry, which we did have some issues with noise. But again, usually it's the mount or where the strut goes on the mount. They're under warranty, folks. Get them replaced. I'm not too concerned. Struts are on most other manufacturers. We're spoiled in the Toyota world where you could go 200-300K on the same struts, but on other manufacturers, every 50K, it's a maintenance thing to replace them. So if the struts become a thing where you got to replace every 5-7 years, it's not a big problem. But usually the noisy ones from the beginning, you replace them and they should be good for a long time. So Kadra says, hi from Naperville. Hey, neighbor. I have a Lovin Avalon 50K, original owner. When I should replace the Serpentine belt, no noise or visible wear. If it ain't broke, don't fix it, brother. You know what? If belts are something that I've seen a lot of mechanics, oh, this belt is glazed. This belt is old. It looks worn. Well, is it cracked? Is it making noise? How is it worn? Toyota belts are some of the best drive belts ever made. Some cars will, like a 03 to 08 Corollas, are notorious to chew up belts, even 09 to 13 because of the manual tensioner. But on your Avalon, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, brother, especially at that miles. I mean, that belt is essentially as good as new. You put a new belt in, give it 2 weeks, it'll look exactly like the old belt because of the idlers that ride on the back of the belt. But if it ain't broke, don't fix it, I'd say. Matt, is it dangerous driving with all the lights on and check hybrid battery on dash? Depends how the car is behaving. If it's running the engine all the time, then there might be an issue, or the hybrid system is actually in safe mode. Otherwise, I would try to get it checked as soon as possible to see what's going on. But short drives here and there shouldn't be an issue. Usually follow your best judgment on that, if you would, see how the car behaves. But if the engine is running all the time and it never shuts off, that's your cue that the car is in safe mode. So that's important to get it checked as soon as possible in that case. So Jack says many owners have replaced the plastic oil filter assembly cap with an aluminum one. If I am, if the opinion that the plastic one is fine as long as the torque specs are followed, what's your opinion? You know what? I recently had, actually this week, I've had a car come in with a blown engine because somebody decided to take the plastic cap and put a metal one, and the metal one was wrong because it was aftermarket, and it leaked all the oil, and the customer never noticed. You were trying to do an improvement, and they ended up with a problem. Folks, the plastic ones, if you don't over tighten them, they will easily last the life of the car. You over tighten them, they're going to crack, but guess what? Even the metal ones can crack. I know it's aluminum and it's stronger, but you over tighten that too much, it's going to break. And the point I'm trying to come across here is the important thing is not to over tighten them, not the material of the filter. And this one has come up a lot, and I really encourage you not to over tighten them. Some of these you can even just put your hand on the filter, tighten it until it stops, and then just give it a kind of a push with your hand. No tools needed, and that's good enough. Remember, what seals these filters is the O-ring, not the actual housing, not like a spin-on filter. So Nanu says, hello from Romania. Hey, man. I have a 2020 hybrid Corolla I'm very happy with. Great car. I agree with you. That's a really good car. Let's see here. So R. Brady got a 2020. Okay, that we already answered. So Christo says, I'm new here. This live stream looks super interesting. How often might these happen? So I'm trying to look into a fixed schedule. So we're probably going to end up doing these every 2 to 3 weeks. I will announce them ahead of time. If you're a subscriber, you'll get a notification. But thank you so much for attending it, guys. I'm doing this for you, and you have shown interest, so we're going to keep doing these. So Dan says, what do you drive, and what's the best Toyota ever made? That's a very good question. I used to drive a 12 Camry, which got, unfortunately, in an accident. I haven't gotten over it yet. I'm still upset over that. I do have a toy car, which is featured in the channel somewhere. I won't tell you. I'll let you look for it. But currently, I'm driving a 99 ML320. That's one that we built on the channel. You guys might have seen that video. It's a great car. It's an endless money pit, and there's more things that are broken with it that are good, but I'm interested in different cars to see how bad they really are, and trust me, it's very bad. But best Toyota ever made, that's a very hard question to answer. Currently, just right off the top of my mind without thinking, 15 to 17 Camrys are really good. They're not the best made, but one of the best. And I think the 13 to 18 Avalons, they're hidden gems. People don't like to buy them. I don't know why. They're really good cars. So JBM, I know you're a Toyota mechanic, but since you mentioned Kia brakes, what has your experience been with recent Kia vehicles in terms of reliability? Folks, I don't like Kia and Hyundai, honestly, but that's just me. That doesn't mean they're bad cars. But I have seen through, I don't work on Kias every day. I don't work on Hyundais every day. But through friends, and actually that car was a friend's car, it's like problem after problem after problem, and it's just never ending. It's like dire problem. And we're talking about a Kia Soul here, which is sold everywhere, and it seems like people are happy with it. I don't know. They're not convincing me there with reliability at all. Julio says, I went to the Toyota dealer and they disable the windows and sunroof, and now I can open the window with the control remote, but it does not close from the control Corolla XSE 2020, and I cannot start. So are the windows working at all from the master switch? If that's the case, go to each window on each door, push the button all the way down till the window comes down, then let it go and push it again and hold it for a few seconds, then go all the way back up, let the window roll all the way up. When it goes all the way up, let go of the switch, and then pull it up and hold it up for a few seconds and see if that does it. If that does it, that's just a calibration for the windows. Repeat that on all the doors, and you should be good. And the sunroof could be a different procedure. You have to press it and hold it to open all the way, and then press it to close, and it'll close all the way. It's just a calibration for the position, so the automatic open close would know where it's fully open, where it's fully closed. So Lexus 510 says, 10 Highlander hybrid, should I have a second key fob? Absolutely. Folks, for all Toyota owners, you should always have 2 keys. It is much, much cheaper to make a new key when you already have one than when you lose all your keys. First, the tow, then the dealership will charge you a lot more than what they would charge you to just program a key. So you always want to have that second key. Don't rush to get it, but as your earliest convenience, especially when you only have 1 key, go get a second key. You will thank me later. Anybody who has run into a lost old key situation with Toyota knows they get very expensive. So Brady says, I have an 07 Camry V6. Acceleration is very loud, especially cold. If I step on the gas, and ideas with the problem. So the V6, when it's cold, it'll make some noise. It's similar to a piston slap noise, and that's what we believe it is. It's not a problem. That's how they are, and it's especially loud. And I know I'm going to go to a slightly different engine on the 4Runners. The exact same thing. People complain about it all the time, and this is horrible. It's not build quality, this and that. But folks, that's the way they are. You'll drive this car for 200,000-300,000 miles, and the noise will be exactly the same. And then you'll remember me saying that was normal. That's just the way it is. It doesn't mean something is breaking or wearing down prematurely, but it's something normal characteristic. However, you said very loud noise on acceleration. I would want to listen to that. If you want, record a video, send it to my email, and I'll take a listen and give you a better opinion. But some of these noises are normal on the V6. So let's see here. So Bit Crazy says, 06 LX470, should I replace the AHC like a pogo stick, go to a regular shocks, or fix? You know what? That suspension is actually pretty well made, and it lasts. But of course, after 14 years, if you have leaks, you can replace individual components, not like the X-Rays on the 4Runner that you got to replace everything. It really depends. Do you like the ride of that car? Because you go to regular shocks, it's going to be different. It's not going to be very bad, but it's going to be different. That AHC system is really, really nice how it drives. So if it's something not dire where everything needs to be replaced, I would just replace the leaking components. If it is, unfortunately, sometimes cost-wise, it's not effective to just go ahead and replace everything. So in that case, just go to regular shocks and should be good. So Jack says, other than the OEM brake pads, are there any other brands that are good or better for our 09 RAV4? Honestly, with aftermarket stuff, there's a lot of good brands. I can't name ones. I only use OEM. I work at a dealership, but there's a lot of good brands, and really this comes down to feedback from other people. Don't buy the cheapest and don't buy the most expensive. If you're going to pay a lot of money, buy the originals. You know how the originals work. They're designed for the car and they work very well. But if you want a little cheaper, you know, you can go some aftermarket brands, but don't expect miracles out of aftermarket brands. Look, folks, the OEM pads, they're designed for the car. They work very well. And the expectation of I'm going to go and buy a better pad to get better results, sometimes you will be disappointed because there's always something to give. If this pad was so magical and wonderful, Toyota would have put it in the car to begin with. But research is the best thing. Go to forums, read what other people's experiences have been. But remember, everybody's opinion of good is different. So sometimes you have to find these things on your own experiments. Jake says, how long would a 2004 Camry with 100K last? I'm afraid of the car age. I'm more worried with older cars. I'm more worried about how well they were maintained, since if you own it since it was new and you've taken care of it, you'll have no problem keeping this car. But if you bought it used, I'm afraid more of the maintenance history. 'Cause some of these cars, when they get older and they're not maintained, they really start falling apart, and that becomes an issue. However, that miles on that RAV4 doesn't worry me at all. It's not high miles. If the car generally is in good shape, maybe take it to your mechanic, or if you're working on the car your own, and have the car fully inspected and make a list of what it needs. Every car will need something when it's old, even a Toyota, but kind of prioritize what's important to fix and what can wait, or what I'm gonna defer and I'm okay with. But checking the overall health of the car is very important, and that'll determine how long it's gonna last. But could it last a lot more? Absolutely, if it's in good shape. Let's see. Quick Shot Gaming says, I can't convince my friend to change his oil more than 10,000 miles in his Kia Forte. Dipsticks stained black on the bottom with Mobile One. Well, you know what? I'll say one thing about that. I see people bring in their brand new car, Highlander. They just spent over $50,000 on this beautiful platinum Highlander. They come in for their first oil change, supposedly at 10,000 miles. The car has 15,000 miles. I drained that oil. It looks terrible. This is the first oil change of the car, and this car has started its life with neglect. If your oil is overly dark when you do the oil change, that's a red flag for me. I mean, look, folks, we all work very hard to most people in the world, we work very hard for our money. And when you buy a new car, most people will go over and beyond to take care of it from day one, because this is your baby. You just spent a small fortune on this car. I can't get my mind around how people neglect their cars when they just bought these cars. I just don't get it. Look, folks, I'm a mechanic. In somebody's different idea of things, when I live off cars breaking down, but at the same time, I care about people. I love people. People take care of your cars. The less you see a mechanic, the better. Your car will need maintenance, and I can live off that maintenance. That's perfectly fine. But I wish your cars never break down, because you work very hard for your car. Take care of it, and it'll take care of you. I just don't understand why people don't take care of their cars. So, hi from Romania. Thanks for your videos. I wonder why in the US the servicing schedule is 5,000 6 months. In Europe, it's close to 10. Actually, in the US, it is 10 in 1 year, but there's a lot of conditions that would switch it to the severe service, and that would make it a 5,000 miles, 6 month oil change. So people watch out for that in the US. Let's see. Edward, where is the switch for the door light? When you open the doors, the light go on when you open the door in 12 Corolla. So this goes for all Toyotas except the ones that are not Toyotas, you know, the Supra and some of the other ones. But the courtesy switch looks exactly the same on all Toyota models. As soon as you open the door, it's right there, black switch that has a rubber cap over it and a little torque screw that hold it. That's your courtesy switch. If you take that torque screw, pull the switch out, you'll see a connector. They're all the same, by the way. All 4 doors will have the same exact switch. You can switch them. You can, if you're doing diagnosis, you think you have a bad one, just swap it over to the other side. If that door starts having an issue, then you know you have a bad switch. They're inexpensive, super easy to replace. But sometimes, one thing I'll say about courtesy switches, they're called courtesy switches. The door could be bent, and when you close it, it doesn't push that switch to shut it off. So that's one thing you got to watch for with doors. We've seen that as well. So let's see. So Mohammed says, what do you think of the 2020 CHR? Unfortunately, hybrid. We don't have the CHR, which I don't understand why. We don't have it in the US. It does have a latest generation hybrid system, so it's a very nice car. And the CHR, the non-hybrid one, is a very reliable car, and it's actually been awesome. We had some concerns when it first came out, but not concerns issue, but we were worried, is this going to be a good car? It was actually a great car. We really have no issues with it. A lot of people ask me to make a video of common problems. It's like, there's nothing. There's nothing common with these cars. So Demetrius says, if the 12-volt and EV batteries both die and the car is in park or drive, is there a way to put it in neutral to tow it or pull it behind a flatbed? If you own a car with a physical shifter, uh, now I'm thinking about it, I think it's just the RAV4 that has a physical shifter. But if you have a Prius, Prius is Prius, any of the Priuses except the Prius C, they don't have a physical shifter. It's just a little knob that's really not connected to anything. Physical shifter will have a cable. If you can get the ones with the physical shifter out of park, even if the car is completely disabled, but unfortunately on Priuses, you're on your no. You have to lift the front of the car, if it's all-wheel drive, all four, and drag it basically. So towing these cars is very interesting because if you just drag it, you could break the parking pole. We've seen that happen, and it's terrible. It's on the towing driver, though. But the best way to tow them is to lift the front wheels off the ground. If it's like a two-wheel drive Prius, if it's all-wheel drive, you got to lift all four. There's something called Go Jack that just goes under the wheels. You pump it, and it just lifts the wheel off the ground. Those are the best to move hybrids that don't move, that are stuck in park, basically. So Brian says, do you trust the Toyota CVT in the Corolla? Absolutely. I actually owned a 14 Corolla. It was one of the very first ones that came out when everybody says, I will never buy a CVT and all the problems. I was one of the very first people that bought a brand new Corolla S white, fully loaded. It was a very nice car. And the only reason I still don't have that car is we needed a bigger car for the family. But actually, that car now, I sold it to a very close friend who still drives it. And every time I see it, I kind of regret selling it. That CVT is very nice. And now with the added first gear, it's even nicer. I wouldn't hesitate a second to buy a CVT. You take care of it, I'll take care of you. This is not Nissan. These are Toyotas. Brian, how do you like the tires on the Venza? I think we talked a little bit about tires. I don't think tires have to do with the road noise on the Venza. It's just, to my taste, at least to in my opinion, it is a louder car, similar to the RAV4. RAV4 is also loud. I think the Camry and the Avalon are a lot quieter than the Venza. What do you think of the 12 Toyota Corolla? Folks, that generation Corollas that's span from 09, 13, I don't like them very much. The reason being is they're very good cars. They're reliable. They have their issues, but overall they're reliable. But the interior is just unbelievably cheap feeling for a Toyota. I mean, going from the legendary 2003 to, I call it that because it is, 2003, 2008 Corollas, they were great. They felt solid. They had very little problems. People drove them for hundreds of thousands of miles and never had issues. Then come the 09 Corolla when it first came out. It just felt cheap. You get in the car, everything rattles, and it just didn't feel solid. Still, people drove them for hundreds and thousands of miles, but it's a very cheap feeling cars. And I feel like because of that, a lot of people didn't take care of them. And I see so many of them neglected. Very hard to find one really in good shape. But if you do and you own one, it's a good car. It just doesn't feel good, but it is. So, Just Can't Kill says, does the 2021 RAV4 hybrid still have the gas issue? We addressed that in the earlier. It does have an issue. It does have a solution. Contact your dealership and they'll take care of it. So, Raj says, just got a 13 Sienna all-wheel drive. If you're watching your awesome buying guide, the rear coil spring is broken. Can it be done without removing the rear axles and drive shaft? I believe you can. You can actually lower the beam a little bit and it's a little bit tight space. It's a little bit harder, but if you use compressors though, if you compress it, it's even easier. Just undo the shock, lower the whole thing a little bit, and you can actually get it done without removing the whole differential and axles. So let's see here. Bill, which new Toyota is easiest to work on? That's kind of difficult to answer because to me, they're all easy to work on. I'm probably not the person to ask for that, but let me flip that answer in a different way. Which ones are especially harder to work on. I think all the V6s are harder to work on. They're tighter space. They require more, like a simple spark plug change. You got to remove the plenum, and they get a little harder. The smaller the engine in Toyotas, the better. Most of them are easier. Even the Prius have gotten a little easier to work on. Before, they were a little harder, especially the second gen and third gen. But for the most part, they're not bad. Most Toyotas are not bad. The new four-cylinder looks intimidating, but once you dig in, it's not as bad, unless you're pulling the engine out and disassembling it, which I've had the pleasure of doing that. It's not fun, but they're not bad. I don't think there's a model. The V8s are really bad to work on. If you're doing that, like a Sequoia Tundra, if you're doing anything other than just basic maintenance, if you're doing a water pump, for example, a belt, they get really hard to work on. But the easiest ones, any Toyota with four-cylinder is really easy to work on. Let's see. Abrar says, is it normal for A25A Camry hybrid engine to be louder as compared to other older engines? Is it do a direct injection? What's a good interval to change the spark plugs? So, folks, all direct injection engines will be very loud. That's just normal characteristics. There's now no problem if per se, but that's just the way they are. Fuel pump, the high pressure fuel pump is very loud when it operates. There's no way around it. It's not a problem. This is what I try to convey to people, is it's not a problem. That's just the way they are. I understand the 1995 Camry was very quiet. You barely could hear the engine running, but times have changed. This is considered normal, that loudness. The chain engines were louder than the timing belt engines, and everybody didn't like that. But now the direct injection engines, they're louder than non-direct. There's no problem. I'm not concerned about it. One thing with these engines is that there's potentially going to be a change. The spark plug interval, it's still 120K, but some of the direct injection engines, especially the V6, that have changed to 60,000 miles. So be aware of that. Follow your owner's manual on that one. On the Camry hybrid, I believe it is still 120K, but do check it in your owner's manual, because there's going to be a shift to 60K, 60,000 mile spark plugs, which already happened with the V6 with the direct injection. So Eric says, 2021 RAV4 Prime owner. Hey man, you want to sell me your car? I'm looking for a Prime RAV4. Why didn't Toyota make an artificial 100% charge but keep the battery at 80 and auto shut off at 80? So that's a design. When engineers design these cars, they're gonna not allow the consumer to cause harm by normally using the car. Now, the car is designed to be fully charged, whatever that actual percentage is. They're not going to let you get to 100%, because these batteries become really unstable and could be flat dangerous at 100%. So they give you that buffer where you could charge it to 80, 84%, whatever that safe number, if you would. That way, if some people, there's going to be somebody in the world, at least one, maybe a lot more, that will not drive their RAV4 Prime very often, but they will have it plugged in the wall 24/7. They will drive it once every month, but they will keep it plugged in. So the engineers, they have to think of these scenarios and kind of do measures to not have fires or problems. So by leaving the battery not an actual 100%, that's what they're trying to avoid. Plus, battery lives will go really down, and their warranty counting department will probably not be happy with them when they have battery failures left and right. Narcoplexic says, are you familiar with Comma 2 Open Pilot? I'm actually looking into them. I don't have personal experience. I would like to get one and test it and maybe put a video out on it for you guys to see what is it about. Any suggestion for improvement mods for the Camry 2020? I'm not big for mods, to be honest. I think the engineers spend a significant amount of resources and time, and the greatest minds make the cars. I don't think we can improve a lot, honestly. Mods, that's up to you. But one thing with mods is try not to go too much electronic mods, because then these cars are very advanced as they are. So I wouldn't go too much. Plus, these cars, I think the 2020 Camry, especially SE, XSE, looks really sharp. I don't know if I would change anything, but that's just me. Phil Miller says, I just bought a 2020 Camry XSE 4-cylinder. I noticed the engine was somewhat noisy when I first take off. Is that normal? Yes, a lot of people have complained about this. Direct injection and just the way the engine is designed with the fixed oil pressure, that's normal. I'm not concerned. I know older cars were a lot quieter, but that's the way going in the future, unfortunately. So let's look at the next one. So Glue says, thoughts on the 19 to 21 Corolla hatchback. I actually love those. These are, when they first came out, we were worried because it was a completely different car than the previous Corolla. TNGA, new engine, new transmission. We were like, here comes disaster. But you know what? I held my breath for a while on those, and I ran out of breath. They are actually awesome. We have zero problems with these so far. Of course, they're still very new. Every car will have its issues, even the best ones. But so far, usually some cars will have some issues at the beginning, like RAV4 fuel tank, stuff like that, batteries dying in the RAV4s. We'll talk about that in a future video. But this one, nothing really, other than maintenance and accident stuff, obviously. But they've been very reliable. I think they're very nice cars to drive for their price and what they are. So Jesus Garcia says, what do you think of the Lexus SC430? Is it reliable? I've been looking to get it as a weekend cruiser. Actually, those are very reliable because that V8, beautiful V8, timing belt V8, if you're getting it, that's a very nice engine and a very nice car. Hard to find, though, in good shape. And people usually have them, they keep them for very long. But if you can get one in good shape, that's a very nice car. Maybe not the most convenient car if you have a family, but as a weekend cruiser, I think it's a great car. Just make sure everything works, especially the electronics. So, Renadir says, I have a 99 Camry V6 306. Do you think it's wise to spend more money on minor repairs? Honestly, there's a point in every car's ownership is when you ask yourself, how much do I want to keep this car? And depending how much you want to spend on it, on minor, and how minor those repairs are, look, folks, cars that are very old and have a lot of miles, there's going to be a point where you're going to have to make compromises, where I'm going to be like, I'm going to let some things go. Yeah, it leaks a little bit of oil. It's okay. It makes a little bit of noise over bump. It's okay. I think the priority with cars that are older, that have miles, is safety. Number one, if the car is safe, it could be not perfect, but it's safe. It's reasonably reliable. It's not going to strand me in the middle of the road because of a bad alternator or something. I think that's okay. There's going to be a point where you have to make a compromise and say, I got my money's worth out of this car. I'm just going to keep driving until the wheels fall off, but make sure you do that safely for your safety and the safety of those around you. But yeah, if it's minor stuff and you're not spending a small fortune, I don't see a problem why you would. So Mark says, I have a 13 Sienna with a clunk in the steering. That's very common on these. It's an intermediate shaft. It's a little bit costly to replace it, but honestly, if it doesn't bother you, you're just worried about safety, I would not waste my money on that because it's not a safety issue. It's just an annoyance, and it's very annoying, and that's just the way they are. So it's really up to you. If it bothers you, get it fixed. If not, it's not a priority. It's not a safety issue that's going to cause problems. So guys, we're running out of time, but I'm gonna pick a few random questions, and we'll pick the last question. Let's see. Got a question here. Awesome Life says, can I add moonroof, adaptive headlights, fog lights, and automatic seats to my 2021 hybrid LE Corolla? You can. Folks, you can do anything to any car, any modification, but the cost is not going to be effective. Really, it's not going to, at the end, and at the end, when everything is said and done, you have spent so much money. You could have used that money to trade in your car and go buy another one with all these options from the factory. Works great without any issues. So moonroof, you can add an aftermarket one, which I highly recommend you don't, because it's a disaster waiting to happen at that point. Adaptive headlights, I don't think they were actually available with adaptive headlights. If I'm understanding what you mean by adaptive headlights. If you mean automatic high beams, uh, isn't it equipped with one? If not, I don't think it's an option that's worth it. Fog lights, absolutely. Fog lights is something you can add aftermarket very easily, not high cost. Automatic seats, I'm thinking you mean power seats. You could, but be careful, because these seats have airbags. You start modifying the seat, that's not safe. So the seats, honestly, I would leave. But the fog lights, absolutely. That's actually a nice upgrade to a car, and it's not very intrusive. Let's think of another. Let's take another question here. So Vladimir says, what do you think about the Prius head gasket issues? Heard they changed something inside the engine after 2012. Is that correct? I don't have concrete information that they did change something inside the engine. Unfortunately, we've been asking about this a lot, but something changed in 2012 on the Prius for sure. Not just the outside cosmetic stuff, inside. The rate of failure of head gaskets mysteriously between 10 and 11 Prius is alarming. Unfortunately, we're all Toyota people here. I'll just say it. It's alarming. It's becoming a huge issue. And the biggest problem with that is there's no concrete evidence why it's happening. People say it's the electric water pump design that's bad and all these things, but they're all theories. There's no concrete evidence that this is what's causing these to fail. And the biggest thing is, if that was the case and it's overheating, then why is nothing warped? You pull these engines apart, you replace the head gasket, everything is straight, nothing's warped, put it back together, and life's good. So unfortunately, it's one of those issues that we're still trying to figure out why it's happening, because any automotive repair that does not have why is not a repair, it's a patch. Any problem that happens with any car, there's a concern, what the problem is, and there's a repair. If you don't know why you're doing the repair, guess what? In 2 years, you could have the same problem all over again. If you don't know the why, I'm not worried about the how we're going to fix it. Why it happened to begin with is the most important thing. Me slapping head gaskets on these cars all day long does not tell me why they failed. And that's where I'm kind of having an issue here. We don't know why exactly they're failing. So, folks, we're going to end the live stream. I'm going to pick the one question, and we're going to do this. We're going to actually pick the last question. The last is always first. That's what I believe. So let's pick the last question. Jose says, should I buy a 2020 Toyota Corolla with 14,000 miles from a dealership for 20,000? Jose, I don't know about prices because they vary a lot from area to area, but I would look at a price of a new one and make a decision. Do you want to, because you're buying such a new car with such low miles, is it worth it? Why don't you just buy a new one if you're going to spend $20,000, why not spend $2,000 more? Yes, I know $2,000 is a lot of money, but you're going to get a brand new car that you only drove if you're paying that high of a price. But again, prices, I don't know about prices. It varies by areas. I fix cars. I don't really price them, but shop around for new ones and compare. How much is the difference between this used one that is 1 year old, potentially has 14,000 miles, or one that is brand new, has no miles? And then you can make the best decision. But if you ask me, is a 2020 Toyota Corolla with 14,000 miles a good car to buy? Oh, yeah. It's a very nice car, actually. All right, guys. With that, I really appreciate you guys joining the live stream. Thank you so much for your questions. Thank you, the guys that and gals that did the super chat. May the Lord bless you and keep you. And we'll see you guys in the next video or live stream. Have a good day.